Hi everyone, and in this session we're going to be looking at navigating reports within Google Analytics 4. So Rachel, let's just get straight to it. Reports then, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so in the reporting section, what you'll find is a lot of predefined reports that are already set up by Google when you create the account. They've got a degree of customization, so you can, change a few metrics and dimensions here or there. You can export, you can change the date range and things like that. But overall, the data is what the data is. It's preset reports that cover a wide range of variety. So it still looks at things like acquisition and how you're acquiring traffic. It looks at engagement and how people are interacting on your website, the pages, the events, the conversions that they're triggering. It has things like monetization. So if you're e-commerce, what are people purchasing, which is obviously always good to know. And then it's got a few little bits that live around kind of the user, so demographics and the tech that they use and that sort of thing. So it houses a lot of different reports, but ultimately it's those predefined reports that you just get given as standard that surface some data to you quite top level. There always tends to be an overview page, which is like a one-page summary of the data that lives within that section, and then some quite detailed pages where you can drill down into those tables and begin to interact and filter with it a bit more. So there's quite a lot to take a look through.
Cool. And I know that we've already signposted learners to the Google Analytics 4 demo account, but again, that's all that we're going to be using for those walkthroughs. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So if you currently don't have access to an account right now, or maybe you feel a bit nervous that you might break something or whatever it is, just everyone can go access it. So feel free to go in there, have a play around, look at what data is available, maybe try and follow the walkthrough along and what's going on.
Brilliant. Let's take a quick look now then.
So if I'm going to take a deeper dive into the reporting section, you want to head to the left-hand side and click into reports. We'll go through kind of each of the key reports in detail and kind of explain a little bit about what they do and the sort of information that you can get from there, how you would actually use that. So if we start with the first report that we'll see, that is actually the real-time report. The logic behind this report is that it shows you activity or events that took place within the last 30 minutes on your website. You might see this little blue navigation box as you are exploring the platform for the first time. It is just a tutorial, a help file, but we can get rid of that. So for example, as you scroll down in this report, you can see that it follows a card-based sort like layout, which holds various bits of information about the activity that's taken place on your website. Again, there's little drop downs here where you can change what the data in these cards show, but ultimately it's just a way of seeing a quick snapshot of what's going on your website. Google Analytics in the reports has about a 24-hour delay in terms of processing that data. So this is a good indicator of how things are going. So for example, if you had launched a new promotion for your business and you were trying to drive traffic to your website, this might be a way to see if that's working. If you were doing any specific types of marketing and you wanted to know if there were any immediate effects, for example, a new blog content went out, you gained a new placement on a high profile website, or you put out a social post, for example, you might want to know if that's doing its job and if it's getting the right level of engagement. So this might be how you check on it. Or if you wanted to verify any new tracking on your website. So for example, you launched a new page on your website, you made some changes to any of the code, you might want to know if that's working. And that's another example of where you'd use real time. Although fundamentally, it's not a really intelligent tool from a digital marketing perspective. It is more of a sanity check rather than potentially giving you any real genuine insights that you would action then in the moment. As we go through the rest of the reporting section, it's worth noting that there's 6 key reports that live in this area. They are acquisition, engagement, retention, monetization, demographics, and tech. Acquisition focuses on how you acquire your users in the website. So for example, how you get your traffic, how you're acquiring new users to the website, the campaigns that they're coming from, the channels, etc. Engagement is all about allowing you to monitor user engagement on the site or on the app through the use of page views, events, conversions. Retention, this actually only has one tab, but it basically tries to cover user retention and engagement to help understand lifetime value. It's great if you are an e-commerce based business, but if you aren't an e-commerce based business, there's only a small amount of data on this page that you'll find useful. When we go on to monetization, this section is solely based on revenue. So I guess, again, if you're e-commerce, then this section is important for you. If you're lead gen, then it's not necessarily a section that is worthwhile. This tells you about revenue that you're gaining from particular products, from advertisements that you've got in place, or any subscriptions through your website or mobile application. You then have some audience-based reports, so demographics, which allows you to understand who is currently visiting your website, and tech, which is all about like what technology are people using to visit your app or website. So we'll just skip through into those areas now. So if we go back to reporting, and under lifecycle, we're going to start with acquisition. You can see there's 3 different reports in here. There's always an overview, which just gives you a summary of key data, and then you've got 2 separate reports where you get it more tabularized that you can gain further insight from. Acquisition is all about where are your users coming from. So it provides information on where the traffic comes from. So for example, is that Google, is that Bing? The methods that they use to arrive there, so organic, email, paid, social, or the marketing effort used, for example, things like the campaign, the keyword, any of those UTM parameters that you may be utilizing in marketing. When we start an overview, this just gives you a summary of the data. There's a handful of cards here that you can use to begin to understand sort of the volume of traffic, the channels that they are coming from, new users by sessions. You've got Google Ads campaigns here, and a little bit on lifetime value. When you go into user acquisition, this is all about how you acquire new users, and you can see the metric, the primary metric there is new users, with a whole load of metrics that are kind of under the channel grouping. And then when you go into traffic, this is all information on how you generate sessions. So where do your sessions come from, and the total amount of users to the website come from? So that is where is your traffic coming from. And lastly, if you have the integration enabled, you can also see campaign reporting. So for example, what Google Ads campaigns do you have in place? And it's all that campaign level data that is housed there. Next, we'll move on to engagement. So the idea in engagement is it's all about understanding what your users are engaging with. So this allows you to measure engagement through the use of page views, events, and conversions, in the idea that this will all begin to help understand user behavior. So again, if we go through these reports, as I mentioned, there is an overview tab. And again, it's a top level summary of what data is available throughout all the subsequent reports. It still has the basic functionality in here in terms of the threshold sampling, the links onto those reports so that you can go and take a deeper dive into this analysis. You've got your event report, which is all about the events that are being triggered on the website. And again, you've got quite a lot of interaction that you can do in here. So for example, you can see all of the event names that are being triggered. And if you were, for example, to click into one of these events, you can see this data in a lot more granular detail. So for example, you can see exactly how that event is being interacted with, or key information about it. So for example, the page location, the page title, and how many events therefore are relevant to this page title for this event, for example. It's worth noting that now everything in Google Analytics 4 is classified as an event. So even, for example, a user viewing a page, that is now an event. And then when we head to the conversion section, conversions are what used to be known as goals, is all about the events that are marked as a conversion. So within admin, there's a toggle that you can turn on and off for whether an event should be a conversion or not. And in this report, it breaks it down and you can see things like the total amount of conversions, the total users, and if you're e-commerce, the amount of revenue or the value that is associated with those as such. On the next report, you have pages and screens. The idea here being that you can see exactly what different pages people are viewing and the kind of engagement time that is alongside these. By default, it shows page title, but you can click into that and move that to page path if that feels more comfortable, so that you can actually see the URLs that are being triggered there. The other reason that it's called and screens is because in that hybrid world, if you did have a mobile application, they don't class as a page view or a page path because it is actually a screen rather than a page. But ultimately, that is where that data would live. And then a newer addition to this engagement section is landing pages. So this now makes it really easy to understand where users are landing on your website, so you can see the total amount of sessions and then the average engagement time, the total amount of conversions or revenue that exists on these landing pages as well. So that's quite a new addition, and I think that's probably something to note is that Google Analytics 4, it's still changing quite rapidly. There's been some big changes over the last 6 months, and so it's something to keep an eye on. Next, if we head into monetization, the idea here is understanding what your customer's shopping activity is. So it provides visibility of revenue that you generate from your products, from your ads, or any of the subscriptions that you've got. So again, you've got your overview section, which helps summarize all of your e-commerce data in one place. You can see things like revenue, purchases, products purchased. Then when you go into the e-commerce purchases section, that then breaks it down by products. And if you set up the tracking correctly, you can almost see a funnel for that product. So for example, how many times was it viewed, how many times did it get added to cart, how many times did it get purchased, and what the total revenue is, and that really helps you begin to make a drop-out funnel of these products. This idea is that it measures the revenue being generated from your specific products as alongside the interaction. And then like we talked about, if you had a mobile application, for example, then you've got things like, okay, well, how many people are making a purchase within the app and what are you getting back from your mobile ads, for example. So there's different reports there. Right now in this demo account, it's only based on a website. It isn't based on a mobile application, but generally that is where that data would live. And then if we go into retention, this is all about whether your customers are going to come back. So it shows you how frequently and for how long users engage with you after their first visit. But there's a couple of things to probably note on this section. So for example, the first bit talks about new versus returning users. Then you talk about retentions by cohort, user engagement, user retention, and then right down at the bottom here, we've got lifetime value. A couple of key things that I think are important when you're looking at this data. When we talk about a cohort, this is basically a collection of users who are grouped by a similar criteria. In this case, in Google Analytics 4 reporting, a cohort is the day that the user was acquired. So the day that they first visited your website, and that's how it tracks that performance. When we go to this user engagement graph, this shows the average amount of time users spend engaged on your site or app after they were first acquired. When we look at user retention, this is the percentage of users who return each day in their first 42 days. You can't extend that time period, and so for people in a lot of different industries, 42 days isn't in their customer life cycle, and therefore it doesn't always house the most useful information. When we go to user engagement, again, this just shows the average engagement time of users who return in those first 42 days, and again, it's that same sort of caveat as 42 days might not fit into your life cycle. And then lifetime value illustrates the average revenue from new users over their first 120 days. Now, that for a lot of e-commerce, 120 days is a great amount of time to track sort of lifetime value, but actually it isn't perfect for everyone. And I think that's why a lot of this analysis ends up being done outside of the platform rather than in platform, because I guess Google can't accommodate for every nuance in your business and give you a graph that is really important to you. And then lastly, if we head into the user section, so if we go into demographics first, this is all about understanding who your visitors are. So for example, it will give you information on age, location, language, gender, and interests. And the idea here is that you can use Google Signals to help give a more holistic view of your data. So the idea there is that Google Signals collects data from users who are logged into their Google profile, but you do have to meet the analytics data thresholds to see this demographic and interest data. It's worth noting that Google may withhold the data to prevent anyone interfering with the identity of individuals based on their demographics and interests. So the idea being that Google Analytics 4 is privacy centric. It's all about giving users that bit of privacy, and therefore if it doesn't meet those thresholds, it is going to hide the data so that you can't single out an individual. So again, we'll look at overview first, but you've got various charts and tables that help give you a bit of information about where your traffic's coming from and what that user makeup looks like. And it's all about that summary of your user data. Okay, so when we look at demographic details, this is a more comprehensive table of the metrics and the dimensions that you can access for demographics. So for example, we can see here when we look at country, there is traffic data in terms of the volume of users. Then you've got things about engagement and engaged sessions. And then if you scroll along, you've still got your things like your events, your conversions, and your revenue. And again, you can change this toggle here. You see you've got country, region, city, language, age, gender, and interests, which is quite interesting because some of this is really useful data when you're helping to understand your audience and who is actually engaged in converting or purchasing from your website in general. And then lastly, we'll go into tech, which is all just about what technology are your visitors using. Basically, this showcases traffic by the technology that your audience uses. And again, it's split into two parts. It's got an overview part and a details part. So you can see, for example, what platform, operating system on the right-hand side there. You've got device categories, you've got browsers, screen resolution, apps if it's applicable, and then a bit more about apps and device models there. And then when we go into technical details, what you have here is very similar to what we saw in the demographics area. It's a tabularized report where you've got a lot of metrics in play, and then you've got all of the dimensions that you can analyze. So browser, device category, device model, screen resolution, platform, device category, operating system. There's lots of information there that you can use. In general, apart from potentially device and browser being useful in terms of understanding behaviors, I find a lot of this section is good for troubleshooting, or from like a conversion rate optimization perspective, spotting where maybe there's bugs or glitches on the website, or people aren't getting the best experience and therefore aren't converting like they should, for example. And so overall, it won't house a lot of useful information that you take day to day into digital marketing, but can be really used as a troubleshooting exercise or as a bit of an optimization and experience exercise as well. And that's some of the key reports that exist within this section. And to summarize, I think there's a few key takeaways that we can sort of draw out of this area. So the first one being that real time can be used to monitor activity as it's actually happening within that 30-minute window. There is a lot of reporting that exists to help you navigate the data with ease and pull out some of that really quick insights in these reports. You can use some of the techniques like building comparisons to really help explore that data further and do some deeper dives in this area. Certain reports within here will require additional setup or customization to be able to drive the most value. Like, for example, Google Ads integrations if you want to look at how your campaigns are performing, e-commerce tracking if that's relevant to you, or conversion tracking if you are lead gen based. And then also just be wary in terms of the thresholds and the data that can come out of here. I tend to go into Explore if I want to pull some deeper analysis, just because it's more raw data that I can manipulate rather than running into issues where this isn't processing the right amount of data and showing you the correct landscape of your data. So it's great for your top level stats as a quick overview of where things are going, like what's happening, where things are performing or not performing, or where you might need to ask a different question. But overall, the Explore section is probably where you can start building up your own reports, and you've got a bit more reliable data there in terms of if you need to do any transformations or anything like that.